Most people today are living life as if nothing major is wrong. They wake up, check their phones, grab coffee, head to work. Maybe complain about gas prices or groceries, and go on with their routine. But beneath that normal surface, cracks are forming that most don't see or don't want to see. Robert Kiyosaki, the man behind Rich Dad, Poor Dad, has been raising his voice louder than ever, saying flat out that the system is broken. The dollar is fake, and that a massive shift is coming sooner than anyone thinks. He calls it his final warning. And the scariest part, he says most people won't realize what's happening until it's too late. Let's start with the heart of his warning, the US dollar. To most people, money feels simply. You earn it, you save it, you spend it. But money isn't just numbers on a screen or pieces of paper in your wallet. It's supposed to be a store of value. It's supposed to hold purchasing power. When you go to work today and trade hours of your life for money, the whole point is that you can use that money tomorrow to buy something of equal worth. But what if that promise quietly breaks? What if every hour of your labor buys you less and less? That's inflation. And Kiyosaki says it's not just creeping up, it's accelerating. He calls the dollar fake money. That sounds dramatic, but here's why he says it. In 1971, the US government made a massive shift by abandoning the gold standard. Before that, every dollar was tied to real, physical gold. You couldn't just print endless money without having gold to back it up. But once that link was broken, the dollar became fiat, meaning it only had value because the government said so, and because people trusted it. Fast forward to today, and that trust is wearing thin. The Federal Reserve has printed trillions of dollars in the past few years alone, especially during crisis. Every time the government runs into trouble, the solution is the same: create more dollars out of thin air. But every new dollar reduces the value of the old ones. That's the silent tax Kiyosaki is screaming about. Think about your own life for a moment. Do groceries feel cheaper than last year? Does rent feel lighter? Does filling your car with gas take less of your paycheck? Of course not. And it's not just because businesses are greedy. It's because the money in your wallet buys less each year. That's inflation. And if you're saving cash in a bank account, thinking you're playing it safe, you're actually losing ground every single day. That's the trap Kiyosaki says most people are stuck in, trusting a system that's quietly bleeding them dry. But it doesn't stop there. Inflation is just one part of the storm. The other part is debt. US national debt has passed $30 trillion, and it keeps climbing. Think about that number for a second, it's so big. It doesn't even feel real. Yet every dollar of that debt is a promise that someday it has to be repaid. Governments can delay, they can refinance, they can kick the can down the road, but eventually the math doesn't work. When debt piles up too high, it either collapses under its own weight or gets inflated away by printing even more money. Either path destroys the value of the currency. That's what Kiyosaki warns about. A spiral that ends with the dollar losing its role as the backbone of the global economy. And here's the kicker. History tells us he's not crazy. Every empire in history has faced the same fate. Rome debased its currency by mixing cheaper metals into its coins, and eventually their economy collapsed. In Weimar, Germany, after World War I, they printed so much money that people used wheelbarrows of cash to buy bread. In Zimbabwe, in the 2000s, trillion-dollar notes were worthless. And right now, Argentina is once again battling sky-high inflation that's destroying people's savings. Every time, the story is the same. Governments print too much, people lose trust, and the currency dies. Kiyosaki is saying the US is not immune. The only difference is scale end. When the world's biggest currency falls, the shockwaves will hit everyone. Now, let's talk about why this is so dangerous for the average person. Most people don't own assets. They don't have gold in a vault, land in their name, or Bitcoin in a wallet. They have a paycheck, maybe a bank account, maybe a retirement fund tied to stocks. That means when the dollar drops, they get hit the hardest. Prices rise, savings lose value, and their quality of life crumbles. Meanwhile, those who hold real assets, things that can't just be printed, protect their wealth. That's why Kiyosaki preaches so hard about gold, silver, real estate, and lately, even Bitcoin. He's not just saying the end is near. To scare you, he's saying if you don't move into assets that survive currency collapse, you'll lose everything. But here's where the story takes a twist. Is he right? Or is this just fear-mongering? Because, let's be honest, Kiyosaki has been shouting warnings for years. He's predicted crashes before, and while some came true, others dragged on far longer than he expected. That's the tricky thing about these predictions. They can be right in theory, but wrong in timing. And in finance, timing is everything. If you move too early, you might sit in gold or silver for years while the dollar holds steady. If you move too late, you miss your chance to protect yourself. So critics say Kiyosaki is too dramatic, too vague, too doomsday focused. And yet, look around. Inflation is real. Debt is real. The printing press is real. Whether he's off by a few years or not, the trends he points to are undeniable. That's why people keep listening. Because even if the timing is uncertain, the direction feels obvious. The dollar can't survive forever in its current form. Let's pause here and dig deeper into what he recommends. Gold and silver are his favorites. Why? Because they've survived every currency collapse in history. You can't just create more gold out of thin air. It takes labor, energy, and resources to dig it up. It has intrinsic scarcity. Same with silver. That's why civilizations across thousands of years trusted them as money. Then there's real estate, land, and property. People always need shelter. They always need space to live and work. Real estate holds value even when currencies wobble. And then there's Bitcoin. Kiyosaki has been more vocal about it recently, seeing it as digital gold, hard-coded scarcity with a maximum supply of 21 million coins. It's risky and volatile, sure, but it's also outside the traditional system. Now, think about this picture. The average person has all their wealth in dollars and dollar-based assets. Meanwhile, the wealthy quietly load up on gold, silver, land, and crypto. If the dollar drops, who suffers most? The everyday worker, who survives? The ones who hedged early. That's the heart of Kiyosaki's final warning. It's not about scaring you for clicks. It's about shaking people awake before they get trapped in the collapse. But let's challenge him again, because that's how we get deeper. Is gold really the answer? Gold doesn't pay dividends. It just sits there. Silver can stagnate for years. Real estate is expensive, and it's not easy for the average person to just buy land when they're struggling with rent. Bitcoin. One day it soars, the next day it crashes. These aren't perfect solutions. And that's exactly why many people ignore Kiyosaki's advice. They look at the risks and think, I'll just stick with what I know. But that's also why most people will be blindsided if the collapse actually comes. Fear of moving keeps them frozen in place. And when the system cracks, they have no safety net. So what's the real lesson here? It's not that you should blindly follow Kiyosaki into gold or silver or Bitcoin. It's that you should stop pretending the system is stable forever. Stop assuming your dollars will always buy the same. Stop thinking the government will save you. The lesson is, take control of your own financial education. Learn how money works, learn where value comes from, learn what assets protect wealth. Because whether or not Kiyosaki is 100% right about timing, the danger he's warning about is real. And the sooner you prepare, the less you'll suffer. Most people hear warnings about money and shrug. It feels abstract. The dollar is fake. Debt is too high. Inflation will destroy us. These sound like headlines that belong in textbooks or history channels, not in their day-to-day lives. But here's the truth. The collapse of a currency isn't just a financial event. It's a human event. It's food prices doubling overnight. It's your paycheck buying half as much. It's retirees finding their life savings worth nothing. And it always happens slowly at first, then suddenly all at once. To understand why Kiyosaki keeps hammering this point, we need to rewind and look at history. Let's go back to the Roman Empire. Rome wasn't destroyed overnight by barbarians, as the movies like to show. Its fall began with money. Roman coins were originally made of precious metals, like silver. But as the empire expanded and debt piled up, emperors started debasing the coins, mixing in cheaper metals to stretch the money supply. At first, people accepted the coins. But over time, trust eroded. Prices soared. Trade collapsed. Ordinary Romans who thought they were saving wealth suddenly realized their money was worthless. Sound familiar? Different time, same story. Fast forward to Weimar Germany after World War I. The government was drowning in debt from war reparations. Their solution? Print more marks. At first, it seemed to work. People still used the money. But as more and more bills flooded the system, prices exploded. By 1923, inflation was so insane that workers demanded to be paid twice a day, because their morning wages lost value by lunchtime. Families burned stacks of cash in stoves because it was cheaper than buying firewood. Again, same story. When a government prints money beyond reason, the people pay the price. Now look at Zimbabwe in the early 2000s. The government printed its way into hyperinflation so extreme that they issued notes worth $100 trillion. Imagine walking into a store with a note that says 100 trillion on it and still not being able to buy bread. That's what happens when money loses all credibility. And here's the hard truth. Kiyosaki wants people to wake up to. Just because you live in the United States doesn't mean you're immune. People think it can't happen here. But that's exactly what people in Rome thought. That's what Germans thought. That's what Zimbabweans thought. No one ever believes their money will collapse until it does. And when it does, it's always the regular people who get crushed the hardest. So let's bring this closer to home. Look at your savings account. Maybe you've got $5,000, maybe $50,000. On paper, it looks safe. But ask yourself, what does that money buy compared to 5 years ago? 10 years ago? In 2010, the average price of a new home in the US was about $221,000. Today, it's over $400,000. Did your income double in that time? Did your savings double? Probably not. That's inflation eroding your wealth. And it's not slowing down. Kiyosaki's warning isn't just about numbers, it's about survival. Because when money loses value, people lose stability. Families that thought they were middle class slide into poverty. Retirees who thought they were secure find themselves struggling. Businesses that rely on predictable costs suddenly collapse. Inflation doesn't care about your plans, your dreams, or your hard work. It erases them silently. That's why he calls this his final warning. It's not about scaring you. It's about jolting people awake before they become victims. But let's pause and ask a critical question. If Kiyosaki is right, why hasn't the dollar collapsed yet? After all, debt has been climbing for decades. The government has been printing for years. Why hasn't the US gone full? The answer lies in something unique. The dollar is the world's reserve currency. That means countries around the globe use it to trade oil, to store wealth, to settle international transactions. As long as the world trusts the dollar, the US has more room to print without instant collapse. That's America's secret weapon. But here's the problem. That trust isn't infinite. Countries like China, Russia, and even US allies are starting to look for alternatives. BRICS nations talk openly about building a new currency system to bypass the dollar. Every time they take a step in that direction, the dollar's foundation cracks a little more. And if that foundation ever shatters, the US could face the same chaos we've seen elsewhere, only on a global scale. This is where Kiyosaki's advice kicks in. He says, don't wait for the collapse to prepare. Don't wait for headlines screaming dollar crashes to move into assets. By then, it'll be too late. The rich don't wait. They diversify now. They hedge now. That's why you see billionaires quietly buying farmland, scooping up gold, building positions in crypto. They know the system is fragile, and they're not betting their future on paper dollars. But let's be real. Most people don't have the luxury of buying farmland or stacking gold bars in a vault. So what does preparation look like for the everyday person? First, it's about awareness. Stop pretending everything is fine. Pay attention to inflation rates, interest rates, debt numbers. Don't trust politicians who say everything is under control. Second, it's about small steps. Maybe you can't buy land, but you can start shifting savings into assets that historically hold value. Even small amounts of silver or fractional shares of gold, even small investments in Bitcoin. It's about building resilience piece by piece. Third, it's about cutting risk. High-interest debt is a noose around your neck when inflation rises. Paying that off is like buying freedom. And fourth, it's about financial education. Learn, read, question. The more you understand, the less you're at the mercy of systems designed to keep you blind. And here's the emotional heart of it. This isn't just about money. It's about freedom. Kiyosaki often says, the rich don't work for money. What he means is, the wealthy understand that money itself is fragile. They don't trade hours of their life for paper. They trade for assets. They build systems that protect them from inflation, from crashes, from collapses. Meanwhile, the poor and middle class keep trusting the dollar, and when it collapses, they're the ones left holding the bag. That's the tragedy Kiyosaki wants people to avoid. The scary part, he might be right. Look at the signs. Inflation that feels sticky, meaning it doesn't go away even when interest rates rise. A stock market that looks disconnected from reality. A housing market that's pricing people out while interest rates choke buyers. A national debt so massive that no politician even tries to explain how to pay it back. These are not small cracks. These are earthquakes waiting to erupt. Now, critics will say, we've heard this all before. People have been predicting the dollar's collapse for decades, and it's still here. That's true. But here's the counter. Just because something hasn't collapsed yet doesn't mean it never will. Think about earthquakes. Scientists can't tell you the exact day one will hit, but they can look at fault lines and pressure and say, this is inevitable. It's a matter of when, not if. That's exactly what Kiyosaki is saying about the dollar. The cracks are there. The pressure is building. You don't have to know the exact day to know you should prepare. And let's add one more layer: technology. Unlike past collapses, today's world is wired together. Markets move at lightning speed. News spreads instantly. If confidence in the dollar cracks, the panic could spread worldwide in hours, not years. That means the collapse, when it comes, could be faster and sharper than anything we've seen before. Imagine waking up and finding your savings halved in value overnight. That's not science fiction. That's what happened in other countries during currency crises. The only difference is that when it happens in the US, it'll shake the entire globe. When you hear about currency collapses in places like Zimbabwe or Weimar, Germany, it can feel distant, almost like an old history lesson. But this isn't just dusty history. It's happening right now, in countries that look a lot more like ours. Take Argentina. In the last few decades, Argentina has gone through repeated financial meltdowns. Inflation in 2023 ran over 100%, prices doubled in a year. Imagine walking into the grocery store today and seeing eggs at $3 a dozen. Then coming back in 6 months and seeing them at $6. By the end of the year, they're $12. That's not a thought experiment. That's reality for Argentine families. Savings accounts evaporated. Retirement dreams crumbled. And the people most hurt weren't the elites. It was the working class, the teachers, the nurses, the shop owners. People who did everything right by the old rules, only to be betrayed by their own currency. Now look at Turkey. Over the past decade, the Turkish lira has lost more than 80% of its value against the dollar. A Turkish family that once thought of themselves as middle class suddenly found groceries and fuel devouring their paychecks. They couldn't plan, couldn't save, couldn't trust the future. Businesses went under. Foreign investors fled, all because their money stopped holding value. And here's the kicker. Turkey isn't some failed state. It's a modern country with big cities, highways, universities, and technology. If it can happen there, why do we think it can't happen here? And then there's Venezuela. The stories out of Caracas are heartbreaking. Teachers leaving their jobs to become street vendors because their salaries couldn't even cover food. Families breaking into zoos to hunt animals for meat. People carrying stacks of worthless bolivars just to buy bread. A country with some of the largest oil reserves on the planet reduced to chaos because its currency collapsed. That's the raw human cost of ignoring financial reality. So let's connect the dots. Argentina, Turkey, Venezuela. Different countries, different leaders, different histories. But the pattern is the same. Overspending, debt, printing money, denial, then collapse. And through it all, the people in charge kept telling citizens not to worry. Everything is under control. We have plans. This is temporary. Sound familiar? That's the same song politicians in Washington keep singing. Meanwhile, the debt climbs. The printing presses hum, and ordinary people sleepwalk into disaster. Here's where Kiyosaki's voice cuts through the noise. He says the biggest danger isn't just the collapse itself, it's denial. Most people don't want to believe it's possible. They don't want to believe that the money they worked so hard for could turn to dust. They don't want to face the idea that their savings account is a melting ice cube. So they ignore it. They watch Netflix, they scroll TikTok, they hope it'll all magically fix itself. But hope isn't a strategy. Denial isn't protection. History shows us the people who survive collapses aren't The ones who laughed off the warnings, they're the ones who prepared when it was still uncomfortable to do so. Let's zoom in and get personal. Imagine a family of 4. 2 parents, 2 kids. The parents both work full-time, earning what looks like a decent middle-class income. They have a mortgage, a couple of car payments, maybe a bit of credit card debt. They've got a retirement account with some savings. Life feels stable but tight. Now, imagine inflation surges. Suddenly, their grocery bill goes up by $200 a month. Their energy bill spikes in winter. Gas prices climb. At the same time, interest rates rise, making credit card debt more expensive. Their paycheck hasn't grown to match any of this. Slowly, their budget falls apart. They cut family outings. They delay car repairs. They swipe the credit card just to cover basics. That's how a collapse feels on the ground. It's not one big Hollywood moment. It's a slow bleed that squeezes ordinary families until they break. And here's the cruel twist. When the government tries to fix things, it often makes them worse. To fight inflation, central banks raise interest rates. That makes mortgages more expensive, car loans harder to get, small businesses less able to borrow. Jobs start to disappear. The same family that was already stretched thin suddenly faces layoffs or reduced hours. That's the trap. You're hit from both sides, higher prices and fewer opportunities. And while you're struggling, the rich quietly protect themselves because they saw it coming. So, what can people actually do? Kiyosaki's advice boils down to one big theme. Stop trusting the system. Don't assume the government, the Fed, or the banks will save you. They're not designed to protect you. They're designed to protect themselves. Instead, shift your focus to assets outside the system. Precious metals like gold and silver. Cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Ethereum. Real estate that generates cash flow. Skills that create income streams. These aren't just investments. They're shields against a broken system. Let's unpack that. Gold and silver have been money for thousands of years. Empires have risen and fallen, but precious metals kept their value. You can't print gold. You can't fake silver. When paper currencies collapse, gold becomes the anchor. That's why central banks themselves still hold it. They know. Bitcoin, on the other hand, is newer, but it offers something unique. It's decentralized, global, and capped at 21 million coins. Governments can't print more. That's why so many people call it digital gold. It's not without risk. The price swings are wild, but it's part of a hedge. Real estate, if bought wisely, provides income through rent and holds long-term value. And skills, don't underestimate that. In every crisis, people who can adapt, create, and provide value survive better than those who only rely on jobs. A side hustle, a trade, an online business, these are modern shields. But let's be clear, preparing doesn't mean panic. It doesn't mean selling everything and hiding in a bunker. It means balance. It means asking, what happens if my paycheck buys less next year? What happens if my savings lose value? What happens if credit dries up? And then taking steps, even small ones, to build resilience. Most people won't do this. They'll laugh. They'll say, you're paranoid. But history doesn't reward denial. It rewards foresight. The psychological part is fascinating. Why do people ignore warnings? Because it's painful to believe the system is fragile. It shakes their sense of safety. It forces them to question their future. That's uncomfortable. So instead, they cling to comforting lies. They tell themselves, the government will fix it. The experts know what they're doing. This has never happened here before. But ask anyone in Argentina, Turkey, or Venezuela if they once believed the same things. The answer is always yes. And yet, here they are, living the consequences. That's why voices like Kiyosaki's matter, whether you agree with every detail or not. He forces people out of their comfort zone. He says what others are afraid to say, that the dollar is not immortal, that the debt is not sustainable, that your savings are not safe just because they're in a bank. He's not trying to win popularity contests. He's trying to shake people awake before they get blindsided. Here's the truth most people don't want to face. Collapse doesn't look like a movie. It doesn't start with explosions or chaos in the streets. It starts with little changes, the kind you can almost ignore. Your grocery bill goes up a little. Rent climbs. Gas costs a bit more. At first, you grumble, but you pay it. Then it happens again, and again. Suddenly, your paycheck doesn't stretch as far as it used to. You start cutting corners, not eating out, skipping small luxuries. That's the early stage of collapse, the slow squeeze. The middle stage comes when people realize it's not temporary. It's not going away. That's when panic sets in. So the question is, who survives the squeeze and the panic? It's not luck. It's preparation. Let's look at some stories. In Venezuela, during the hyperinflation crisis, one family had been warned by relatives abroad. Instead of keeping all their savings in bolivars, they converted part of it into US dollars and small amounts of gold jewelry. When the collapse hit, their neighbors were burning through worthless stacks of cash. But this family could still trade their dollars and gold for food and medicine. They weren't rich. They weren't immune. But they weren't desperate. Why? Because they prepared when it felt unnecessary. Contrast that with another story, this time from Argentina. A retired teacher had saved her entire life in pesos. She trusted the banks. She believed the government when they said inflation was under control. By the time she realized the peso was collapsing, it was too late. Her life savings, decades of work, bought her little more than groceries. She wasn't lazy. She wasn't careless. She was simply too trusting. That's the cost of denial. Kiyosaki's message boils down to this. Don't be the second story. Don't trust the system blindly. Build your safety net before the crisis hits. Now, let's talk practical steps. These aren't get-rich-quick tricks. They're survival tools, strategies to give you breathing room when the system stumbles. Step 1. Diversify your savings. Stop keeping everything in cash. Yes, you need some for emergencies, but cash alone is a melting ice cube. Inflation eats it alive. Instead, split your savings into buckets. Some cash, some in precious metals, some in digital assets, and some in tangible goods that hold value. Step 2. Own tangible assets. Paper money can be printed, gold cannot, silver cannot, land cannot. When systems fail, tangible assets survive. Even small investments count. Owning a few silver coins or a piece of land, no matter how modest, is better than clinging to numbers on a screen. Step 3. Build multiple income streams. This is one of Kiyosaki's biggest lessons. If you only rely on one paycheck, you're fragile. What happens if inflation outpaces your salary? Or your job disappears? Start a side hustle. Learn a skill you can sell. Create something that generates passive income, even if it's small at first. Multiple streams create resilience. Step 4. Reduce debt. High-interest debt is like quicksand. When inflation rises and interest rates spike, debt becomes a trap. Pay it down as fast as you can. Imagine entering a crisis free of credit card bills. That's freedom. Step 5. Stock essentials. This isn't about panic buying. It's about smart preparation. Extra food, water, medicine, these aren't luxuries. They're lifelines. In every crisis, supply chains break down. Those with even a small stockpile ride out the storm while others scramble. Step 6. Build community. Collapses expose a hard truth. You can't survive alone. Skills, resources, protection, they're stronger in groups. Whether it's family, neighbors, or local networks, community is a survival multiplier. A lone wolf might last a while. A connected family lasts longer. Think of it like building a fireproof house. If you live in a forest, you don't wait until the flames are on the horizon to clear brush. Dig fire lines and stock water. You prepare when the forest is quiet. That way, when the fire comes, you don't panic. You act. That's exactly how financial resilience works. But preparation isn't just physical. It's psychological. In every collapse, some people freeze. They can't accept reality. They keep swiping cards, hoping banks will work it out. They keep waiting for the government to step in. By the time they face the truth, they're broke, panicked, desperate. Others, the prepared ones, accept reality early. They don't waste energy on denial. They focus on solutions. That mental shift makes the difference between survival and ruin. So, let's picture two families. One ignored the warnings. They trusted the system. When inflation hit, they had no savings outside cash, no stockpile of food, no backup plan. Within months, they were maxing out credit cards, selling possessions, falling behind on bills. Stress tore them apart. They blamed each other. Their lives spiraled. The other family listened. They weren't rich, but they diversified. They had gold coins tucked away. They kept a pantry stocked with essentials. They worked side hustles that brought in a little extra income. When inflation spiked, they didn't panic. They adjusted. They made it through. Same storm, two outcomes. The difference wasn't luck. It was preparation. And that's the uncomfortable truth most people don't want to hear. Survival isn't about being smarter, richer, or more connected. It's about making small, uncomfortable choices now before the crisis. It's about trading short-term comfort for long-term resilience. That's why Kiyosaki's words feel so urgent. He knows most people will wait until it's too late. He's trying to reach the few who are willing to act before the panic sets in. Here's the part that stings. The system isn't built to save you. The government, the banks, the corporations, they'll save themselves first. When the collapse comes, they'll bail out billionaires, not the working class. They'll protect their own power, not your paycheck. The sooner you accept that, the sooner you can stop waiting for a hero and start becoming your own. This isn't about fear. It's about freedom. Imagine the peace of knowing that no matter what happens, inflation, layoffs, debt crises, you're ready. You've got assets that hold value. You've got food on the shelf. You've got income streams that don't vanish overnight. You've got a community that's got your back. That's what preparation buys. Not just survival, but peace of mind.